condition of refugees at Europe's borders remains one of the biggest human rights issues facing Europe today. Last year alone, almost 75,000 people, many of whom were children, sought international protection in Greece, having made the dangerous journey in search of safety. Although arrivals have dropped in recent months, tens of thousands of asylum seekers remain stranded on the Greek islands. Most of them are housed in desperate conditions in refugee camps dotted along the islands, in Athens, and near the mainland borders. Moria camp in Lesbos was infamous for its dire living conditions. Originally built to house just 3,000 people, it was almost always over capacity, and by the summer of 2020, housed over 18,000 asylum seekers, including 1,000 unaccompanied minors. Occupants waited in line for hours for food and struggled to find shelter. Hygiene standards were dismal, and there were repeated safety concerns. Each winter, thousands of people lived in tents in freezing conditions. In this context, access to justice for this vulnerable population has remained a pressing concern. The capacity to provide legal assistance has been, and continues to be, far outstripped by the need. Greece has a legal aid system, but only for the appeal stage of the asylum process. There is no state-provided legal assistance to reach, inform, advise, and represent asylum seekers in relation to their asylum interview. Without access to lawyers, asylum seekers have no way of obtaining information about their rights or understanding the complicated legal procedure. Without access to lawyers, the rule of law is undermined and human rights are at risk.
The incredible need in Greece had been clear to us for some time, but building a pro bono project that meaningfully utilised the capacity of law firm volunteers, lawyers that were not asylum experts, that may not have worked closely with vulnerable clients in the past, that required some careful thought. We had to work out at what stage in the preparation process their skills would best fit, what areas of asylum law that they could be taught in a relatively realistic timeframe, and we wanted to be clear ourselves how we knew they were going to add real value while they were on the ground. It took us probably a little over a year of research, discussions and scoping trips to Greece to meet with NGOs there before we had what we thought was a solid project concept, one based on true collaboration between the law firms with the volunteer capacity and the NGOs with the local knowledge and asylum expertise. We also knew that for the project to be a success, we had to build in some strong project infrastructure so that the law firm volunteers would have the necessary training, supervision and support while they were there to ensure they're in a position to make a real difference.
The project is a collaboration between 6 law firms: Orrick, Dentons, Allen & Overy, Ashurst, White & Case, and Charles Russell Speechel's, and the NGO European Lawyers in Lesbos, or ELIL. The UK NGO Refugee Legal Support was also a crucial project partner in our first year. Each firm commits a significant amount of funding to ELIL yearly to contribute to training and supervision costs, as well as each offering a number of volunteer lawyers from across their EMEA offices. Prior to COVID, firm volunteer lawyers spent 2-week stints in Greece on the ground working closely with Greek lawyers and ELIL's volunteer European asylum lawyers. Post-COVID, given the continuing health risks, we run a remote secondment program instead.
The project is run truly collaboratively between the project partners, each firm taking on different responsibilities in terms of logistics and support for ELIL, from running the volunteer roster to assisting with the development and update of the training materials. We have monthly calls with all project partners to cover important updates and to discuss any ideas or proposals. And in between, we have regular email traffic between the firms and ELIL, sometimes every day, to make group decisions on the day-to-day running of the project. We all work so closely together and productively, with honest and open discussions and feedback. And this is one of the reasons why I think the project works so very well.
The work that our volunteers undertake focuses on assisting asylum seekers prepare for their first instance asylum interview, which includes research preparation, note-taking, and supporting throughout client meetings and producing first draft supporting memoranda. Volunteers also work on family reunification applications, which includes participating in client meetings and meetings with family members in destination countries to gather the necessary documents and evidence, and preparing the application and supporting memoranda and working on ad hoc research tasks. When the program was running in person, in pre-COVID times, volunteers also fielded procedural inquiries and registered new clients, as well as participating in group legal information sessions.
The project helps individuals of all ages, genders, and nationalities. The most common nationalities arriving in Lesbos and Samos camps since 2019 have been Afghan, Syrian, Congolese, and Iraqi. Most of our clients are extremely vulnerable due to the trauma of the situation they escaped in their home country, their harrowing journey to Greece, and the conditions in the camp.
Our project is open to all qualified lawyers and some exceptional trainees in the partnering firms who should be from an office or jurisdiction in the Middle East or Europe. And in fact, we've had a whole range of people participate, from beginning lawyers up to senior partners, and from most practice groups and offices in the region. We've been really moved by the interest and enthusiasm and excitement from our colleagues to do this, because after all, it's a heavy lift. You've got to be trained up into a new area of law, immigration law, and then you've got to spend 2 weeks in a chaotic, difficult, emotionally draining situation, or now do so remotely because of COVID. But we're pleased to say that the project has been oversubscribed from the beginning. We've always had more volunteers than places, and it just shows how much people want to help those in need right now.
The project has faced and continues to face many challenges. One difficulty we, along with all of the other projects and NGOs working on this issue in Greece, have is the frequent changes to Greek policy and procedure. An example of this is the new asylum law that was implemented in January 2020, which aimed to greatly speed up the process and increase deportations. It meant that our clients now have interviews at extremely short notice, often within a day or two. This is where our partnership with PILnet, an experienced NGO working on the ground with local legal staff, is important. Our volunteers work closely with PILnet's volunteer European asylum lawyers on each case, and the amazing PILnet Greek lawyers are the absolute experts on the Greek legal system. They have connections in the sector to make sure everyone involved in the project is kept up to date with the ever-changing and complex landscape.
One of the big challenges of this project was managing the expectations of our excellent volunteers, making sure that everyone who did the work did so with their eyes fully open, understanding that the realities of working with an NGO like PILnet on the front lines of the refugee crisis, particularly during a global pandemic, is very little like working in commercial private practice for a global law firm. We affectionately refer to it as expertly managed chaos. On any given day, there can be changes in Greek policy and procedure which have a very, very real impact on PILnet's ability to do its work on the ground. Quite often, meetings need to be rescheduled or rejigged at quite short notice because of completely unavoidable changes in the personal circumstances of asylum seekers. Individual cases and the workload around those cases can also be very difficult to predict. Some cases are incredibly complex, require a great deal of preparation and desk-based follow-up, and it can be very difficult for PILnet to predict those cases before the work actually begins. And of course, the volunteer lawyers that participate in the project work very closely with PILnet's team of Greek lawyers and volunteer asylum lawyers from across Europe, many of whom are themselves sole practitioners, and so don't perhaps have the reflex to lean on the kind of expert support that our volunteers are able to provide. So to overcome all of that, to blend as seamlessly as possible the very different worlds of humanitarian fieldwork and private practice pro bono work, we worked collaboratively to develop some very detailed memoranda that set out our ways of working. We make sure that everyone on the team is regularly and fully briefed, and that means our pro bono lawyers, but also the PILnet team, the permanent staff and the volunteers. And of course, as an organising team, we remain always open for feedback, and we are constantly improving our ways of working.
We have been very concerned with making sure that our project fully equips our lawyers to work with very vulnerable clients and also builds in a self-care component. The nature of the work they do on the project is vastly different to what our volunteers do on a day-to-day basis. They will read materials or be in interviews that recount stories of horrific trauma and extreme violence, and they need to both understand how to react and respond to this material and ensure that they don't become affected themselves. We have comprehensive notes on this in the training area. We make sure there's adequate supervision at all times by expert lawyers. We offer psychological support to our volunteers, and we make sure that we check in with them every day during their secondment.
It is no surprise that COVID-19 created major challenges for the project,
given that it was developed as an in-person volunteering model. The safety of our volunteers, PIL's staff and our clients was paramount, and we made the difficult decision back in March 2020 to temporarily halt the project. But the need for legal assistance on the islands remained very high, and we were eager to help in other ways. So together with our project partners, we set up a remote assistance model where volunteers can now do remote secondments or join an ad hoc support group. And through this method, we've been able to continue to support the project both in Lesbos and in Samos, where PIL has created a second project. Training and supervision has remained very comprehensive, and procedures have been put in place to ensure the highest standards of client care.
The project has provided PIL with 50 volunteers to date who we estimate have advised more than 1,400 asylum seekers. Less than half of all refugees were granted international protection since 2016. But when those seeking asylum were advised by lawyers through PIL, they had an approximately 30% greater chance of gaining protection. The pro bono support provided through this project has not only provided vital legal assistance to countless individuals who would not have otherwise received it, but allowed numerous refugees to secure asylum and avoid a return to their home countries where they were certain to face persecution or even death.
One example of a vulnerable client the project has helped is a boy from Sierra Leone who was mistakenly detained as an adult. He told us that his lawyer had literally saved his life. Another example is a woman from Syria who arrived at Moria with her 6 children seeking reunification with her husband in the UK. She told us that the most important thing is to have a lawyer. Without a lawyer, the people of Moria have no rights. Of course, our aim is not to ensure that everyone gets asylum, but to ensure that the system works equitably and that people are able to present their case in a way that ensures they get a fair hearing.
The living conditions in camps like Moria and going through the asylum procedure can be dehumanizing experiences. Asylum seekers are systematically inhibited from accessing information and basic services such as health and sanitation, which has been particularly challenging during the time of COVID. There's been a material positive impact which comes through asylum seekers being able to speak to volunteers about their situation, where they're given a space to tell their story, ask questions about the asylum process, and also just inform themselves about their basic rights. Volunteers ensure that all asylum seekers are treated with dignity, kindness, and respect, and they listen to all issues, even if they're not always able to help with all of them.
It is clear that the need for this project will remain for some time to come. The situation on both Lesbos and Samos has deteriorated in recent weeks, both in terms of access to justice and, more generally, of the conditions of the thousands of asylum seekers living there. A devastating fire in Moria has destroyed the whole camp, leaving all of its occupants homeless and without access to water, food, medical supplies and sanitation. Most have now been moved to a new camp where lawyers are yet to be granted access. In Samos, the camp has seen some confirmed cases of COVID-19 and remains under lockdown, also with no access to lawyers. We are concerned about what may lie ahead for these vulnerable individuals, and all of the project partners remain committed to providing support and assisting in this humanitarian crisis in whatever way we can.